if there are any questions, related to any questions related to the interactions that we have had so far. A reminder that we started looking at the research process. I don't know how many of you have had a chance to reflect on the things that we've discussed here. By the way, can somebody maybe just confirm if you can hear me just fine, and also if I know you can see my screen because I'm about to log in and join, but could somebody maybe just confirm if you can hear me just fine? Hello, can you hear me? Okay, thanks, Mr. Sam.
Yes, you are very loud and clear.
All right, thank you very much. So in the interest of time, I guess we are going to start, but I wanted to start off with, and I will send email about this. I wanted to start off with kind of like an apology, I guess, or something like that. I'll be working from out of town. I think it's beginning tomorrow. So I'm not sure if I would have arrived at my destination by the time we're getting to 17 hours. So it's unlikely that we'll have class tomorrow. Actually, I want to call it off actually, because I'm planning to. We are planning to travel tomorrow actually, although it's not yet confirmed. I'll only be able to confirm later. Either way, it's likely that we're going to, travel maybe either late in the morning or in the early afternoon, in which case we'll probably be too tired for us to have class. I certainly won't be physically available. So the first announcement is this week. I am I'm not going to be available, as I'll be working from out of town. And also, so our classes are going to be virtual. And because our classes are going to be virtual, I'm going to, and because I'll be busy facilitating some workshop beginning, is it Wednesday or something? Our class on Wednesday is certainly going to be affected. Okay, so I think one of the things I would want to highlight here is the fact that on, if I can just maybe picturize this here, I'll just say show this, I guess, just display this. So in essence, what I'm saying is that where's that thing? I don't know why this is not popping up. Ooh. I don't know why this is not coming up here. I don't know what's happening. Just tick it. So in other words, what I'm saying is that our class tomorrow, I'm a bit skeptical about canceling classes, although I'm not very sure. I'm not sure if I'll have arrived at my destination. But what I wanted to do is maybe through the course representative, I wanted to maybe reschedule this to, let's say, an hour later, because I wouldn't want us to not have class tomorrow, right? If it turns out that I'll have issues by the time I get to 18 hours here, then I will communicate, and we'll move this class to maybe Thursday or Friday, right? In the evening. But the first thing here is that the sessions are going to be virtual. So tentatively, the Monday class has been rescheduled to 18 hours. I'm assuming there's not going to be any scheduling conflict with any other classes. We will maintain the Tuesday class. We'll have it at 7 hours, but it will be virtual. And then the Wednesday class, I am proposing that we either move it to 18 hours or to 19 hours. So there are those two options. Now, the thing is that I have other classes that I teach. So I guess I can work with the people that have decided to join class here. I don't know where the others are, but I can work with those of you that are attending class right now to find out what you would prefer, or rather, just to find out here. Do you have any class at 18 hours? Is there anyone who has a class at 18 hours? If not, I have shifted, right, this class, the Wednesday class, to 18 hours. And what you notice, by the way, is for all these classes, we use the same link, yeah? We don't change links. It's the same exact link. So you might as well just bookmark that link or something like that to make life a lot easier. Again, just to recap, what we are saying is that we have changed things. I don't know if I don't know if people want to be reminded here. And for those of you that have access to WhatsApp group, just share the link and remind them that class has started or something. They may have forgotten. But anyway, so I hope you've taken note of these important announcements, right? Something else I wish to bring to your attention is the fact that assignment number 2, which is topic selection, will likely be made available sometime this week. Probably, possibly Thursday, but probably Friday. So just take note. The way we do this is done on a first come, first served basis. So the group that selects the topic first gets to keep that topic. And we do not have instances where we have multiple groups working on the same topic, right? We avoid that. It's a lot easier that way. Anyway, unless there's any questions, we can, I guess, proceed here. A reminder that we had gotten to a stage where we were looking at the research process. In other words, we had started our discussion of the scientific method, kind of, right? And I'm hoping that the approach we've taken is making it relatively easier for people to understand. There we go. To understand what it is we are doing, right? I hope. It's my sincere hope here. Oh, this is 20. I don't know where this is coming from. This is 2034. May have to re-export my slide. Sorry about that. I'm hoping that people are gradually beginning to understand. Now, if you remember last time we met, right? I started taking us through some sample examples, right, of quote unquote real world projects, right, that have been done. There's the more obscure enterprise medical imaging project, if you remember. And then there was also the case of the disappearing spoon. And all the while, what I was actually doing is I was taking us through the entire end-to-end process of let's download this entire end-to-end process, the research process itself, right? And then what we then did after that is we started defining what research is all about, right? So we realized that there were some really interesting things that were coming out of the definition of what research is, right? Rigor was one of them. You know, we saw the word systematic come up over and over again. So this idea that everything that you do must be done in a very systematic manner, if you will, right? Something else that obviously came up here was, I think this is it. I don't know. Something else that obviously came up was the issue of knowledge, right? The fact that scientific research is fundamentally rooted in this idea that you're interested in making sure that I don't know what's happening here. Yeah, one of the things you obsess a lot about is making sure that whatever it is you're doing by way of research results in some contribution to the body of knowledge, right? There's got to be something novel about what you're doing, right? So if you look at these definitions, and indeed if you look at other definitions that you come across in whatever text you're reading, you notice that the key themes are common here, right? Contribution to the body of knowledge, existing body of knowledge, and studying a problem systematically. And we see that there's a difference here between some of these cultural things that we attach to, right? Like if you look into traditional healing to a certain extent, there's less rigor there. There's certain things that cannot be explained, and stuff. Anyways, so we did that, and then we got to a stage here where we reminded ourselves that using what has been written about what research is all about, we can actually come up with something that combines all these different assertions or things that people have come up with, right? The fact that, for instance, research is an organized and systematic way to find answers to questions. That would be like your really formal definition of research. If somebody ever asks you, what is research? Well, research is an organized and systematic way of finding answers to questions. You find answers to questions because there are no answers, there are no solutions to the questions you have. So you're adding to knowledge, is it? You're coming up with a known from what was previously a known, ideally. You do this in an organized and systematic manner, right? And we threw in something here. We highlighted the fact that research is a creative process. Now, again, if you look at existing literature, there are people that have written about why exactly it is we undertake research. Because the question to ask here, if we're learning about research, why are we learning about research? Why would we be interested in undertaking research, right? So Hasi and Hasi, they itemize or enumerate some justifications for why research ought to be undertaken, right? And I'll read these things verbatim and try as much as possible to explain. Some of these explanations, you notice, are aligned with the definitions of what research is, right? So we undertake research because we want to investigate some existing situation or problem. Why are we poor, right? Why is it that the vast majority of Zambians are poor? Is it? We want to investigate. We don't know. Why is it that decades and decades after we attained independence in 1964, why is it that we're still dependent on aid coming in from the outside world, right? From people that previously oppressed us? We would want to understand, right? So we're investigating an existing situation. Okay. Why is sanitation a problem at UNZA? That's an existing problem. Okay. Why is the cost of living so very expensive now all of a sudden, right? You're investigating some existing situation or problem. So now the thing here is there's something interesting about research, right? So investigating or conducting research doesn't always result in a solution. In some instances, in fact, I want to argue in most instances, especially for projects done at UNZA, you conduct research to understand the situation, not to come up with a solution. So it's like, why is sanitation a problem at UNZA? Your research is going to be restricted to find out why sanitation is a problem, not to provide solutions, because providing solutions would entail you undertaking a different sort of study. The study that you'd undertake to find out solutions to the problem of sanitation at UNZA may be different, or in all likelihood would be different from the research you'd undertake to understand why sanitation is a problem. Right. So the other reason why we would want to undertake research is to provide solutions to a problem. So you have a known problem, you would undertake research to provide a solution. And again, looking at the examples I just gave, what you do is, in fact, point number 2 could potentially be an extension to a study that was done to investigate, right? So somebody tells you we are investigating poor performance of learners in remote primary schools on the Copperbelt province or in Mpongwe district or something like that. That research would be restricted to just finding out why performance is poor. A subsequent research would be aimed at identifying potential solutions, right? So we undertake research to provide solutions to problems. Okay. We also undertake research to explore and analyze more general issues. A lot of general issues here. Why is it that the vast majority of students that come to UNZA come from Lusaka, right? You look at the proportion of people, if I was to take a poll here, I'll conduct research right now because I don't know the proportion of, can I ask, out of those of us that are currently logged on, how many of us went to school in Lusaka? If you are able to raise up your hand, please press the hand icon here, raise your hand, I want to see here. But what you begin to notice is that the vast majority of students enrolled in 2034 probably went to school in Lusaka or something, or they're from Lusaka, right? And in fact, more generally, you find that this pattern manifests itself in all these other different schools and programs, right? So the question is, why we would want to explore and analyze such a general issue? You know, is it that a lot of people in remote areas don't have the necessary information that those in Lusaka have, for instance, right? Anyways, we also conduct research to construct and create a new procedure. What you begin to notice is that a common thing to do, especially if you look at the methodology of research, is you would identify an appropriate technique to utilize, right, to conduct research. Like you say, well, we built this piece of software, and to assess the usability of the software, we used UTAP, or we used the Term 2 questionnaire or something like that, right? Or use a SUMI questionnaire. What you could do, if you're conducting that sort of research, is you can construct or create a new instrument that can be used, a new way of doing things, ideally, right? It would be like a methodological contribution. So we conduct research to construct or create a new procedure, right? In addition, we conduct research to construct or create a new system. The new system could be a piece of software, for instance. We also conduct research to explain a new phenomenon. All of a sudden, we notice that people within Lusaka are suddenly getting a lot of malaria. Where is this coming from when we know that malaria is not endemic in this part of the country, right? That's a new phenomenon, for instance. Or I don't know if you've heard of these weird things like certain boarding school where students all of a sudden have neurological conditions or something. That's a new phenomenon, right? Or maybe we notice a behavior exhibited by UNZA students that was previously not exhibited. All of a sudden, students don't attend classes, right? Anyways, we also conduct research to generate knowledge. This makes sense because it's part of our definition we looked at, right? You don't know, you don't know what other planets, you don't know whether or not there are other planets that are habitable, right? When it comes to human beings, for instance, you'll be generating new knowledge by analyzing, I guess signals from the sky or something, right? Using these sophisticated telescopes, you're generating new knowledge. But what's important here is you yourself, for instance, may want to undertake research because of the combination of all of these different reasons. I want to add in something here. In your case, you'll be conducting research in 2034 because it's part of what you need to do for you to satisfy the requirements of 2034. This is a bit of a joke here, but the reason you'll be conducting whatever problem you choose will be either one of these different reasons that are itemized here. Okay. There's some random examples I can already think of. Last year, there was a group that was looking at cost of living at UNZA. Why were they doing this? Well, we suggested this because I guess it's like they did not know, right? The situation is a problem. We don't know what the cost of living is at UNZA. Like if you have new students coming in at UNZA and they want to, ask their guardian or their parents or something or sponsor for a specific amount of money. It's like there's got to be a starting point, right? It's not just tuition fees. They may need to know how much money it's going to cost them for a given term or a semester or something like that. So these guys conducted research, which involved, I think they conducted a survey with UNZA students, and they were able to come up with an average cost. What else did they do? There was another group that was interested in finding out internet connectivity at UNZA Great East Road campus, or internet speeds actually. So it's like, do we know which, if you're using EduRoam, right? I don't know if you guys use EduRoam here, but if you're using EduRoam, there was an announcement here that EduRoam has been extended to the old halls of residence. I don't know to what extent that has been done here, but it was all over the news here. But last year, right, it was unknown. And we just noticed a very unusual, phenomenon here. You'd see students clustered in certain parts of campus. Like if it's School of Education, they'll be clustered somewhere. Is it because they know that the internet speeds are much higher there? So what these guys did, what they were required to do was to do an analysis of the entire campus, Great East Road campus, with the aim of finding out which places around campus have better internet speeds, right? There's also a group that looked at sanitation, perceptions of students in regards to sanitation at UNZA, right? Yeah. So in all these instances, if you notice, right, part of the reason why they were doing this can be attributed to either one of these different reasons we just highlighted here. I don't know if that was a question. I don't know if there was a hand up or something. I thought I heard a sound here. Is this making sense? I don't know if there's a question. No hand up. That's fine. Now it turns out really that now that we know the definition of research and we understand why we conduct research, there's something interesting about research. The fact that the relative quality of research is the lifeblood of any scientific discipline. In other words, the manner in which you conduct this research is extremely important, in part because the trustworthiness of the data that you collect or the conclusions thereof that you draw once you conduct your research is dependent on the relative quality of research, right? So things like your methodological approach, how exactly you're undertaking the research, things like how you go about analyzing the data that you collect, things like where you're collecting the data from. If you're conducting a study that is focused on understanding a phenomenon at UNZA, the research quality will be significantly low. It will be fundamentally flawed if you just collect data from School of Education students or from students that are in the Department of Library and Information Science, right? Because the quality will be compromised. It will be difficult for you to generalize. You cannot generalize something based on data collected from a single department out of a lot of other departments associated with a lot of schools, right, at the University of Zambia. Anyway, so it turns out really that without high quality research here, disciplines would stagnate, right? One of the reasons why there's gradual progression or advancements in these different fields, like if you look at computing, for instance, not too long ago, we didn't really have a lot of things we are seeing in the field of artificial intelligence, right? These advances in artificial intelligence, things like large language models and chatbots. The reason why we see all of these things happening is because of high quality research, right? As a result, we're seeing progress. The reason why we are seeing astronomers reclassify Pluto as not being a planet, apparently, is because of high quality research, right? The reason why the government is coming up with all these different policies, like they're increasing the total number of people that are placed under the social cash transfer program, is because of high quality research, right? Anyways, so important there. So without high quality research, a number of disciplines would stagnate and they would fail to advance past their current limits and understanding. We advance beyond our current limits and understanding because we are adding to man's existing body of knowledge, right? Anyhow, there's more though. In addition to these generic things here, there could be reasons why we're conducting research here could be aimed at trying to push for policy implementation, right? So for instance, we conduct research to help make informed decision. I don't know if you're aware, but one of the policies at UNZA, as it relates to, I think, is it enrollment, I think, of students, is there's a quota associated with students that come from underserved communities, right? That's policy that, or a decision that was informed by research that was obviously conducted. What else? Well, we want to have a proportional representation of women in parliament or something. You just don't dream about that, right? There are people that would have conducted research, you know, to try and understand those landscapes, which ultimately will result in policy implementation or something. Anyway, we also conduct research because in one's career, you'd need to conduct research, right? So an example is myself. I conduct research, or people like me, I conduct research because for me to be promoted, I must conduct research and publish papers, right? I must conduct research and publish papers. The only way I can advance in my career is if I do research, right? In your case, I guess, for you to advance in your career, you've got to pass this course, unless if you decide to switch careers or something. So you've got to do research. You do research in 2034. You will also do research in RAM 4014, in LIS 4014, and indeed in ICT 4014. Yeah, so there's that. Now there's something interesting here, right? We keep talking about research and adding on to man's existing body of knowledge. It turns out that it becomes important for us to remind ourselves of the various ways of finding out things that are unknown. I have this persistent headache over and over again. I don't know what is causing the headache. What could be causing the headache? I mean, that could be viewed as a research problem, is it? And if you look at our culture, it turns out that there are various ways of knowing, right? We can use personal experience. If you've experienced a headache in the past, then your research will lead you down to a solution like, no, I'll just go and purchase paracetamol at a pharmacy or something like that, right? So based on personal experience or intuition, right? You say, oh, I have a headache, I'll just go to a pharmacy. What else do? We can take advantage of experts, for instance, right? Who would be an expert in this particular case? A medical doctor. You go to a medical doctor and then they'll do all sorts of tests to try and ascertain, because a medical doctor understands that a headache is a symptom caused by something else, right? An underlying condition. So they'll do all sorts of diagnosis and then maybe they'll come up with a solution. So we've narrowed down on the problem here. This is a problem, and possibly the solution is this. In some instances, especially in this part of the world, we would make use of past traditions, is it? Well, in the past, my grandparents have used some bark extracted from some weird tree or something. Once soaked in water, if I just drink this, then I'll be okay. right? Or you go to a traditional healer or something like that, in wherever it is you're living in your community. A traditional healer will probably do the chanting and all those things, and I don't know, maybe you'll be cured, maybe not, or something, right? Key thing here is we gain knowledge from past traditions. Now, I'm giving these weird examples here, but there are other ways of knowing, right? It's interesting here. I mean, weird things like mental disorders. People figured out, without using scientific method, I guess, people figured out that one of the ways in which you can gain information. Can I ask that maybe we mute our microphone? One of the ways in which you can gain more knowledge about why some mental disorder or some neurological condition may be taking place is by looking at what has happened in the past. Is it if there's a family that has a history of a certain condition here, and they marry, or somebody from that family gets married to a family that has a similar condition, then you end up, having a child that will have a similar condition or something. So we know, right, from traditions. But also, it turns out that another source of knowledge could be through an authority figure, right? In the past, in our culture, these authority figures have been religious leaders, for instance, traditional leaders, right? So you have some certain level of trust. But increasingly, I guess your source of knowledge in your case would be perhaps your lecturers or something like that. I don't know. But our interest really is trying to understand how we can, get knowledge by taking advantage of the scientific method, the systematic way of acquiring knowledge, ideally. I'm not saying that you wouldn't acquire certain types of knowledge from an expert or from traditions and authorities, but what I'm saying, or my argument, is that the scientific method is perhaps the most reliable out of all of these. Right? You just don't take it by faith that what Lighton is telling you when he's standing in front of you is the truth just because he's an authority figure, right? Just because he's been to school. Right? You should have a benefit of a doubt, is it? You just don't take it by faith that everything that a preacher or a priest will tell you is the correct thing, right? You wouldn't want to believe everything that an expert like a medical doctor will say, right? You go to a hospital because you have this serious condition and they tell you, we need to operate on you. And you take it by faith that that should be done. A serious thing like that requires a second opinion, right? You verify, trust, but verify. So you go to another hospital, and if all three hospitals say the same thing, then you know it's true, right? But it turns out if you take advantage of the scientific method, you actually undergo a very rigorous process, ideally. Anyways, so the question really is, seeing as we talk about the scientific method, the question is, because there's a science component here, what is science, what is the scientific method, and how is it related to research, right? Just briefly here, when we're making reference to science here, we're referring to a body of established knowledge, right? And the idea really is, when you're looking at science here, you're more concerned with making an observation, identifying problems, when we're talking about science, conducting some sort of systematic investigation, and then using that information coming out of your systematic investigation to come up with an explanation, a theoretical explanation of some natural phenomenon. Why is it that we normally have droughts after a certain period of time, for instance? Right? Why is the snow melting, right, in the North Pole, something like that? But really, the ultimate goal may sometimes be theory generation or verification of some existing theory idea. That's what science is all about, right? And the scientific method, which is tied to this whole notion of science, ideally involves the principles and processes regarded as characteristic or necessary for scientific investigation. So in other words, any sort of principles or processes that will enable you to make an observation of a problem, to identify some phenomenon or a problem, to conduct an investigation and come up with a theoretical explanation, is what is tied to the scientific method, right? So the scientific method involves principles and processes, right, that are tied or required for scientific investigation, ideally. Another way to think about the scientific method is it's a process or an approach to generating valid and trustworthy knowledge. Remember, I made mention of the fact that there are various sources of knowledge, various ways of knowing what is unknown. Yeah. And what we're saying is that the scientific method is a valid and trustworthy way of knowing what is not known. What happens when we die? What the scientific method, what those people that use the scientific method will tell you is, I don't know, right? That's what they'll tell you. Why are they saying they don't know? Well, we haven't yet, as science, as far as we know, we haven't yet gotten to a stage where we know what happens when we die. But if we go to an authority figure, like a priest, right? Or a pastor, they will tell you when you die, you either go to heaven or hell or something like that. Well, I don't know about that here. When you go to a traditional healer, a traditional authority figure, they will tell you when you die, you go and join your ancestors or something. Okay, I don't know about that. So what we're saying is with the scientific method, it's a systematic process, right? An approach to generating valid and trustworthy knowledge. What you begin to notice, it's something I like about the scientific method or science in general, is the fact that if you don't know something, right, what this method or what this approach teaches you is to actually admit that you don't know. Is there life elsewhere? I don't know. Are we truly going to go to heaven when we die? I don't know. Is there life after death? We don't know, because as far as science goes, nobody has conducted a systematic study that has demonstrated or has shown us exactly what happens when we die, right? What happens when you abuse alcohol? Well, you probably mess up your liver, right? You probably develop some weird form of cancer or something like that. We know that is likely to happen, not that it will happen all the time, but it is like the odds are it will happen, because science has demonstrated that this is what actually happens, right? Anyways, so at science, and then it turns out really that research, then we can come up with a definition, or we can look at research from the perspective of science and the scientific method, right? And simply put, what we see here is that research relative to the scientific method would be the application, right, of the scientific method. Because what we're saying is, for you to conduct research systematically, one of the approaches you can take advantage of is the scientific method. Another way of putting research here is it's a systematic process of collecting and logically organizing information. I hope this is making sense. And really, something else worth mentioning here, although we'll discuss it in subsequent lectures, is this notion of research methods, right, or research methodology. So you have research. Question would be then, what is a research methodology? What are research methods? These are ways of collecting and analyzing data. Research is a systematic process of collecting data. The question is, how exactly do you collect data? How do you analyze that data? Well, you use your research methods. Research methods can also be viewed as the already existing methods that have been developed to acquire trustworthy knowledge, right, through reliable and valid procedures. And you soon notice, once we start discussing methodology, for instance, that there are systematic ways of collecting data using surveys, right, like a questionnaire, using interviews, using observations, using workshops, right, using ethnography. Yeah, these are all ways of for acquiring trustworthy knowledge via reliable and verified procedures. Anyways, that's that. Hope this is all making sense here. Now, please don't go out there and say we have this lecturer who's been telling us, he's been shooting down on religion and traditions or something. No, right? I consider myself to be religious, right? But we're trying to make a distinction here between the scientific method and other sources of knowledge. And in fact, I was deliberately pointing at the fundamental flaws of these other ways of knowing. Yeah, right. There we go. So it becomes also important here. Now that we know what research is all about, what science is all about, and what the scientific method is all about, it becomes important for us to identify some important characteristics associated with research. Right? So we're just going to go through here is go through some of these characteristics of research with the hope that we'll be able to understand what research is all about comprehensively. So research is supposed to be is considered objective here, right? There is not all the time, but there is usually very less bias, right? So research is bias agnostic. Okay, and the reason it's bias agnostic, obviously, is because it is based on facts rather than personal feelings here. There's usually less subjectivity, right? If I ask, Emma, is Lighton effective at teaching 2034? If you ask me, right, I'll probably say yes, right? There's some bias in that, is it? There's some bias in that because I've not objectively assessed to what extent I'm effective, right? However, if I'm systematic, if I were to be systematic enough, I would actually probably do some research right now, some very basic research right now, and say, I'm going to do a poll here. To what extent is Lighton effective, right? Maybe I wish there was a way I could do a poll here, but do a poll and try and find out to what extent Lighton is effective, and based on the responses from all of you, I'll be able to deduce, right? I think there should be a way of conducting. I can use poly, I guess. We'll make up something here. I'll be able to acquire knowledge systematically, is it? Yeah, it just won't work, I guess. I wanted to do some simple experiment right now to find out to what extent, based on the few, to what extent is the old Phiri effective at teaching this 2034 or something. I know this is a bit subjective. You probably I don't know if this thing, I don't know if there are any it's a horrible way of doing this, but maybe you can enter anything in that poll or something. I don't know if you can see that poll, but yeah, so you know, it's based on facts rather than personal feelings or subjective opinions. And you'll notice that we are usually very systematic when we're collecting data, even if data is perceived to be subjective. You know, like if you're just interviewing a subset of students, if you're conducting interviews, I wouldn't interview all, is it 35 of you or something? What I would rather do is get a representative sample and then interview them. And the way that you identify the representative sample is typically done in such a way that there's less bias. Anyways, so research is objective because research aims to collect data and draw conclusions without being influenced by preconceived notions. I am constantly sick here and I live in Kawe, I'm always experiencing headaches or something. Oh no, it's witchcraft. Those are preconceived notions, right? Perhaps what the scientific method, what research will lead you down to is, they'll tell you that, and they've been talking about this, is it? The pollution levels insofar as lead is concerned are quite high, right? In Kawe. In fact, Kawe, it's been in the news recently, is one of the, is it not the most poisonous habitable towns or something in the world or something like that, right? You know, there's something on DWTV, everybody's talking about Kawe because they didn't know this, right? Anyways, so no preconceived notions here, right? Everything is rooted in science, in data. You draw conclusions based on the data that you collect, right? You make an observation. We see that a lot of kids that grow up in certain parts of Kawe, for instance, those high-density areas that are much, much closer to, let's say, where the lead was mined or is still being mined here, tend to exhibit certain neurological disorders, right? What research will lead you down is a path where you systematically collect data and try and ascertain why that is happening. Anyways, so objectivity, right? But we see here that research must be precise. There's a reason why it must be precise, right? you'd want research to be reproducible, right? If I say I have this persistent headache, and somebody tells me, well, you should probably take paracetamol or something. Science has led us down the path where we know that if you're an adult, depending on the type of paracetamol you're taking, depending on the milligrams, I guess, if you take 2 tablets, you're going to be okay, right? And the reason why that is the case is because the methodological approaches, the measurements, and the descriptions that were used when coming up with paracetamol, something or some variant of paracetamol, were exact, right? And they were clarified. So anybody who takes paracetamol when you have a headache or something will probably be feeling fine after X number of minutes or hours or something like that. Anyways, again, precision is tied to how we describe things. So the language and terms that we use in research when we're writing, when we're communicating ideas, must be clear and precise. We conducted a study with 34 students. We used simple random sampling to identify a representative sample. The sample size of the research was 20 participants, because the target population was, I don't know if it's 60 individuals, and we use Slovene sample size formula. You're being precise, clear, specific, exact in the language and terms that you're using. Again, more on precision here. The data that is collected must be accurate, clear, and meaningful, right? So you'll find instances where you say, well, we collected demographic details of all the study participants, right? Like the poll that I've just issued. I don't know if it's working on your part here. It's like out of, I don't know why this is not working here. Out of the 34 people that are participating here, what was the gender distribution? So as I'm collecting the data, I'm taking advantage, I'm collecting, right, data associated with demographic factors of the participants. What is your gender, right? What is your major? Are you doing the Barham program? Are you doing the ICT program? Are you doing the LIS program? What is your minor, right? So we are being accurate, right? So that we are clear and meaningful in the way that we are analyzing the data afterwards. But also, research is expected to be verifiable. If I conduct a study with your cohort, and I'm trying to find out the extent towards which I'm effective at teaching. If I conduct a similar study next year, I should be able to verify the findings from this year. In other words, if I discover this year that 60% of students think Lighton is not effective, right, on a scale of, I don't know, 1 to 5 or something. If I repeat that study next year with next year's cohort, I can verify my approach to conducting research by trying to check if the results I get next year are aligned with this year. Now, they may not be exact. There are other confounding factors here, because as I'm teaching, I become better. Is it every year? Every time I teach 2034, I'm better. So my teaching this year is much better than the teaching last year, right? Because of my experiences last year. So obviously, there are those subtle differences there. But you get the point. The point here is that research should be verifiable. And you can only verify the research you're conducting if it's reproducible. In other words, other people should be able to follow through with the steps you undertook so that they get the same sort of results. And this has really broad implications, right? If you conduct a study at UNZA aimed at finding out the cost of living at UNZA, somebody should be able to reproduce the research, perhaps to conduct a study at UNILAS or CBU or something like that. I don't know. Anyways, and the idea about reproducibility here is that other researchers should be able to replicate your studies and obtain similar results. Not exact results, but similar results. And we'll have a whole discussion of variables, independent variables versus dependent variables and control variables and all those things. Anyhow, sorry about that. Research apparently should be parsimonious, right? It should be simple, ideally. You don't want to complicate things, right? You always want to make sure that the steps you're undertaking are as simple as possible. In fact, even the language that you use should be as simple as possible, although there's certain domain-specific language that cannot be avoided. Like when you start talking about sampling, we use snowball sampling. If you start talking to your parents, if they don't understand research here, they'll be surprised, right? Just like my mom, if I start having a conversation with her, because she's listening, about sampling and target populations, she probably won't understand here. But the idea about simplicity is you want to make sure that you have very simple explanations, right, to the data that you've collected, explanations, the data that you've collected. Or for instance, it should be simple enough so that you use existing theories, right, to fit the evidence of the data. Usually, in some instances, rather, when you're conducting research, one of the things that you tend to do is you ground whatever research you're conducting by taking advantage of existing theories. Like for instance, we do a lot of usability research with my students. And so what you notice here is that in terms of usability, there are theories like TAM2, TAM, and UTAUT or something. These are all theories that will help ground whatever usability studies you're conducting. So these are theories, right? The idea behind the theory is you use them to guide what you're going to do in the research, how you're going to explain the results obtained from your research, ideally. We see that, again, in terms of research, research should be empirical. And the whole notion about empiricism or being empirical is you are relying on observations or direct sensory experience, right? So you rely on data that is collected either through direct observation, that's your empirical data, or through experimentation, rather than just depending on speculation or hearsay. No, this person died mysteriously. And because he died mysteriously, at the funeral, we've seen all of this, right? I think it happens a lot in Northwestern province or something. I forget the way they use here. You have these people, the pallbearers, moving. Apparently, the coffin is dragging them to the house of the person that killed the deceased person. How? That's like speculation, right? Oh no, we've heard that if you inject, I don't know, chickens with this sort of medicine or something, they'll grow big or something. This is hearsay or speculation, right? So rather than doing that, you want to make sure that the data that you're going to collect is collected through it's collected systematically through either direct observation or experimentation. We'll get to have I guess a discussion on the distinction between observations and experimentation and all those things here. But a classic example of experimentation here is I think I already gave this example. There's a new, maybe I haven't here. There's a new drug, right? And we want to determine the effectiveness of the drug. What do? You conduct an experiment, right? Maybe it's a malaria drug, okay, I guess. Rather than going to a traditional healer, you develop medication, right? In the lab, so there are chemists in the lab, they do their thing, and then they arrive at an appropriate malaria drug or something. Now, to test the efficacy of the drug or the effectiveness of the drug, you can conduct an experiment. You say, we'll go to UTH, and when people are tested for malaria, we'll have two groups, group 1 and group 2. So we'll conduct an experiment where group 1 will be given the new drug, and group 2 will be given existing drug, maybe quinine or something. And then afterwards, this is a bit crude here, but you see how many people died from group 1, how many died from group 2, or how many people were cured of malaria in the shortest period of time in group 1. And then you draw conclusions like, oh, we conducted an experiment that yielded an interesting result. We see that people in group 1 were cured of malaria within a week, whereas people in group 2 using the existing medication only became okay, or they became cured after maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something like that, as a classic example of an experiment, right? So we see here that research, again, is supposed to be logical. Very, very important here. It's supposed to be logical in the way that you are conducting your research, right? So you follow a logical sequence of steps. That's the scientific method. You start with making an observation, you come up with a hypothesis, you collect and analyze the data, and then you draw your conclusions or your report, right? They're logical like that. In fact, even the thinking around how you're making certain decisions, the justification must be logical as well. And then finally, we see that research is supposed to be probabilistic, right? What we are saying here is that the results that we get out of research are not exact, right? They're not absolute truth. They are an approximation, right? Which is why there are words or terms like we were able to, the results we got seem to suggest that Lighton is not effective at teaching. We got statistically significant results, and you have, oh, p-value, the p was less than, we saw that 60% indicated that Lighton is not effective, and the p was less than 0.05 or something like that. Those are just approximations, right? You're approximating something that is closer to the truth. It's not exact, right? Just like they'll say 15% of Zambians drink alcohol or something. It's an approximation. It's not like they're telling you that if you have 100 people, 15 of them drink alcohol. No, right? Something that is closer to the truth. So again, more on research being probabilistic here, we're saying that the research results are not guaranteed to be true for every individual. I gave you examples. No, science says that you shouldn't risk becoming pregnant beyond the age of 35 because you risk, giving birth to a child that will probably have certain defects or something like that. They're not saying that everybody who has a baby after 35 is going to experience that, right? But the odds are higher. No, they tell us that alcohol is bad, or tobacco smoke is bad, and I'll get cancer if I smoke tobacco. But my father, or my father's father, my grandfather lived to be 100 years and he never had cancer. It's the odds, right? Chances are that you're going to experience that. So research is probabilistic. Listen, guys, I'm transitioning to a different meeting. I'm going to pause here and maybe just find out if there are any questions. But in case there are no questions, I'm going to say something here. At the beginning, I mentioned something. Yes, Mr. Innocent Kunda.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, and everybody. I was trying to ask, what form of tense should the research be written? Should it be in terms of theoretical? Should it be in the present, past, or future? Thank you.
No, I mean, so it's a matter of writing style here. If you're reporting, obviously it's in the past, right? Use past tense, and we have a whole discussion centered around that. But also your question borders on writing styles. It turns out that writing styles are different, right? Some will write things like, we conducted a study, we recruited 50 participants, whereas some people prefer to write in the third person, which is my writing style. A study was conducted at the University of Zambia, or the study was conducted at the University of Zambia. 50 participants were recruited. But in terms of actual tense, if it's a proposal stage, it's future tense, right? Because you see, what you're asking here is about how you write, how you report. And when you're describing your research, you describe it usually on two different stages, a proposal stage and also when you're reporting. When you're at proposal stage, you use future tense. A mixed methods approach will be used to conduct this research, that's proposal. Whereas when you're reporting, It's in the past because you've already done that. A mixed methods approach was used to conduct the study. All right. Hope that answers your question here. Listen, yeah, listen, you guys. I have to proceed now to my next engagement. So I'll see you when you see me, which is tentatively tomorrow, but it's likely that tomorrow will not be possible. But I will confirm. If it is possible, I have indicated that the event will be virtual because I'm working from out of town. I'm traveling out of town. I mentioned this early on in the process, but in case people have just joined us, we've made some changes. We are saying tomorrow's class will be virtual, but it will not be at 17, but tentatively at 18 hours. Okay. And then our class on Tuesday will take place in the morning at 7, but it will be virtual because I'm out of town. Our class on Wednesday, I'll still be out of town, will be virtual, but it will be at 18 hours. Okay. I also mentioned that in the event, in the event that there are conflicts with an already existing class or something like that, please have the course rep inform me, and then we can make adjustments. The sooner we do this, the better. I also mentioned early on, and I don't know if I did this in the past, that the meeting link that we use is the same. So you better bookmark the link that we've been using here, ZP something. Yeah. All right. So thank you very much, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow at 18 hours. Thanks. Bye.